when an explosion happens, temporarily you're blinded because of the smoke screen and the dust that gets kicked up. I start thinking to myself, and you've got to imagine this is chaos, right? And I can't see anything. I can hear everyone around me screaming. Everyone, I'm assuming, thinks we've been attacked.
Hi guys, welcome to the show. Today we've got an amazing person for you. It's a guy called Mark Ormrod, MBE. Some of you might have already heard of this guy. He is a triple amputee after stepping on a landmine in 2007 on Christmas Eve in the middle of Afghanistan, where he was serving as a Royal Marine. So this is an inspirational, amazing roller coaster of a chat. Like I say, one of a series. So make sure that you come back and watch the rest of them after this first introductory one. So today we talk all about his story, what happened to him over in Afghanistan. So strap in and get ready for this awesome interview with Mark Ormrod, MBE.
Thanks for doing this, mate. I really appreciate you spending the time. You know, Mark Ormrod, MBE is one, it's a mouthful, but two, it's brilliant to be able to sit and speak to someone as inspiring, because for these kind of things, I just like really having interesting conversations with interesting people. And I know we connected on Clubhouse via Matt Fidesz, and he kind of put us together and what have you, and he did a great show as well, to be fair, which was fantastic. Really enjoyed the chat with him. And so for those guys that don't know you, I don't generally like to give you too much of an introduction, because I want people to go Google you and see what you're all about, so they can find out all the interesting stuff. But let's sort of start at the beginning, where when you joined the forces, and sort of go from there. Yeah.
Okay. So I joined straight from school. I was coming to the end of my compulsory education. I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do in my life, about 15 and a half years old. I live in Plymouth, which is where I am now. It's a huge military town. We've got Navy, Army, Royal Marines. I think the only thing we don't have is the Air Force down here. So it was a big influencing factor, of what I wanted to do in my life. And where I grew up, towards the town centre, all of my friends growing up, we all went to the same school, but they were all like 2 to 3 years older than I was. Mm-hmm. So they had left school by the time that I was coming up to my GCSEs. And a couple of them were in the army. They were over in Germany in I think it was called the 2nd Tank Regiment. And they would come home on leave, and they'd have brand new cars on finance. They'd be boozing every weekend. They'd always be like giving me money and buying
weekend millionaires, yeah. Where you'd like scrimp, eat from the naffy all week, and then go blow it all at the weekend, and then repeat.
Right, but for like a 15 and a half, 16-year-old, it looked like a damn good lifestyle. And what really sold it to me was they come back and they go, "Oh, we've just done a BFT, a CFT, all these fitness tests, and this. We've been out, eating ration packs." And I found that quite exciting to talk to him about. And so initially, my friend John, who was in the tank regiment in Germany, took me to the careers centre as I was getting towards the end of school. And I got all the paperwork to go into the army, because bizarrely, I'm a former Royal Marine, but I didn't know who the Royal Marines were. Mm. You know what I mean? I just thought, if I want to be a soldier and I'm going to do that cool stuff, be fit, travel the world, live in holes in the ground and all that lot, then you just join the army, don't you? That's just what I thought, if you want to be a soldier. So I took the paperwork home, and my parents had a look at it, and then they told me that I had an uncle who was actually a former Royal Marine. He had started at the bottom, and he had left 22 years later as a captain. Wow. Now, I only lived about 20 miles up the road from where I am in Plymouth, in a place called Buckfastleigh. So I hopped in the car one weekend with my dad. We went up, and I remember he lived in like a barn conversion. And I opened up that big front door, that barn style door, and the first thing I saw was a giant citation with an officer's sword with a green beret on the end. And we sat down and had a chat, and he told me about the Royal Marines, and he tried to explain to me why it was different to the army, what made them different. And then
that's interesting, because from having obviously an army background myself, what did he say to you? Because obviously there's the banter between obviously Army, Navy, Marines, Paras, that kind of stuff. So what did he tell you Because I always find that fascinating of like, how did you differentiate the two?
The thing that really appealed to me was where he explained, you know, if for example, I had a real passion for cooking, right? And I was in the military and I was in the Marines because I love cooking, but I also like to be a bit wary.
Yeah.
You could be a chef in the Marines, and I know it's not gourmet cooking, but you're in that environment you love, like a bit like Steven Seagal in Under Siege, right? He's the chef, right? But he's the martial arts ninja. But you're always predominantly infantry. So if you deploy, you can switch back like that in infantry. And that interested me because he said, like, and I don't know if this is 100% true and it may have changed, but if you join the army and you be a chef, then you're a chef.
Yeah,
right? Very unlikely you'll pick up a rifle again except for your annual
weapon handling tests, go down the ranges. Yeah, other than that, you wouldn't, you certainly wouldn't go and you wouldn't go to the rear echelon and grab a chef. You know, as amazing as all the army chefs are, they play their role within the wider cogs and you know the like the logistics side of, you know, keeping us fed, which is really freaking important. There's two people in the forces you never want to piss off. One is the PTIs and two are the chefs, because they can both inflict some kind of pain in one way or another. So, you know, those boys do a phenomenal job. But you're completely right in what you say, in that once you're in a role in the forces, yes, you're still a soldier first, but you're not really as well, unless you're infantry front line, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that really interested me because I thought, well, I got the best of both worlds. If there's something that piques my interest, like a PTI or something, I could go there, do all the fitness and run around with a vest on with my hair gelled, looking all good.
That's exactly what I did.
Right. But then I can switch fire on operations and get my belly in the ground and be crawling in the dirt and doing all that cool stuff. So that really appealed to me. And then also, like, just the way they operated. And this got reinforced for me when I went down to the career center and watched the VHS video, right? He said, you know, you'll train in the jungle in that environment. Then you'll train in the desert. You can train in the Arctic. You train in the woodland. Now you can go, you jump out of planes and you parachute. You go in by speedboat. You put these big ass packs on your back and you go in by foot. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is literally, because I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, big Schwarzenegger, Stallone fan. It's literally like Rambo and Commando, the movie. It's like, there's nothing that these guys couldn't do in my mind. And they were so flexible and adaptable. And then I started, you know, you look into it a little bit, don't you? And you start reading a bit of history and you understand about the prestige behind the Green Beret. When I went back to the career center and I saw the VHS cassette, I'm like, boom, like just got this instant connection with this. And I'm like, that is what I want to do.
Can you remember, so you're a kid of the 80s, 90s. So are you 40 yet?
Sorry?
Are you 40 yet? 40? 37, yeah. So I'm 40 in November. So can you remember In Combat magazine used to come in like the weekly like binder folders and stuff like that? Yeah, that was one of the key things that I used to collect, like the inserts, you know, seeing the SA-18, M60 the Pig, and they'd go for all the weapon systems. And it was actually that was the catalyst for, I think, setting the trend to go into the forces for me. Just that hard binder that I'd want to get every single week throughout the 90s, where all my friends were getting like smash hits and loaded or whatever. I was like, no, I want to get an M16 this week.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. And there was just something, and I didn't really know it back then, but I used to get really excited of the thought of just personal growth. Mm-hmm. You know, I just thought, I'd love to learn how to survive in the jungle or whatever, if I really had to. I'd love to learn how to operate in the Arctic. Do you know what I mean? I just had this fascination with it, like with seeing what a human being could do and what situation you could put yourself in and learn how to overcome it and survive in it. It just fascinated me, and the Royal Marines seemed like the place to be.
Yeah, it's almost like selling James Bond to a James Bond fan. It's cool as fuck, you know, and you get to go and play with all the big boys' toys that you know no one else really gets to go and play with. So I didn't actually realise until I was looking into your background, a bit like a stalker, you know, where we went. I didn't realise that you'd actually left the forces because you went into close protection and then sort of came back around and went back in. And it was when you'd come back in, that's where that's where the Christmas Eve happened. So when did you decide that you were getting out? Once you got your Green Beret, you'd done all that. Had you done tours before you then left, or not?
Is that really loud? Sorry.
Can't hear a thing.
Okay, cool. So I was really lucky in the fact that, I say lucky. So I joined in February 2001. I went through training in one hit and I passed out in October 2001. So it's like 4 weeks after 9/11.
Wow.
So we knew, I remember being stood in the cafe. We'd done all the hard part of training. We're doing all the march and everything, getting ready for the fancy parade. And we all saw it on the telly. We were all shoving burgers in our faces, all, super happy. And then we saw this and everyone just kind of looked at each other like, now we're going to actually have to do this job. Because you know what it's like, you can join the forces and you can maybe have a 15-year career and never go anywhere and do anything because the timing's not there. You just miss everything.
Yeah.
And we were just like, we hadn't even got our lids yet. We were 4 weeks away from it, and we just saw this and knew that we were going to be doing something.
It's really weird. I was in Depot Para at the time in a field in somewhere, and we thought 9/11 happened like that night of the exercise. And I'll never forget his name. It was Tiddy Tidmarsh. He pulled us around the fire, and we thought he was giving us a situation brief on this is what we're doing here on exercise. And he pulled out a copy of The Sun, and we thought, these guys are Gucci as fuck, bringing out a fake copy of The Sun with the Twin Towers on it and stuff like that, giving us all this like Taliban and all this kind of stuff, all this speech. And it was a legit copy of what had gone on. And then from that, we were straight back like to base. Alert state went up. That was it. And that was it's weird that we were almost in similar times, maybe a few weeks apart in the journey at that moment in time, which is really weird.
Yeah, but I was 18 at this point. So as a young, cocky, arrogant, brash 18-year-old, you get quite excited about that. You think, I'm going to go and get to test myself now. So we passed out early 2002, got trained to go on Operation Jacana in Afghanistan, but never ended up going. They scaled it back. And then just settled into unit life. I think after that, shortly, I did a bit of Arctic warfare training, bit of boxing, and that was it really. And then 2003, I deployed to Iraq on Operation Telic 1. Yep. So for that initial invasion over the Kuwaiti Iraqi border. So I managed to fit quite a lot into like 3 or 4 years. I'd earned my beret, I deployed on operations, I trained in the Arctic, I'd done all this other stuff as well, like here, there, and everywhere. And my girlfriend at the time then was pregnant with my eldest daughter. So I thought, okay, I'll do my minimum 5 years and I'll leave. I was 21, maybe 22, still young enough to start a new career for the next 30 odd years. So I put my notice in to leave. I left in 2006, January.
Me too. Me too. January 14th, 2006 was my index.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things didn't go to plan. I separated my daughter's mum. I ended up, staying on friends' sofas. I was working as a nightclub doorman to try and get some cash. But I took my enhanced learning credits, all my military resettlement money, and a bit of money I had saved up, flew out to South Africa and retrained as a bodyguard for 6 weeks, thinking that I was going to come home, again, still young, thinking I was going to, fly home from this course, do a Kevin Costner, looking at the celebs in London and just earn loads of money and have a great life. And it just wasn't like that. I really struggled. There was loads of work around, don't get me wrong, but I was young, I didn't know anybody, and I just couldn't get work. And at that time, the security industry was becoming regulated. The SIA was just being born. They were trying to get rid of all the thugs and wannabe gangsters that were working on nightclub doors and stuff. And so the police were quite harsh. And I ended up getting in a lot of trouble. It seemed like every week. And this sounds like I'm exaggerating. I could literally stand there, get punched in the face, and get arrested for hurting someone's knuckles. It was just blew my mind. I'm like, what is going on? This is just spiraling. And it all started to get a little bit too much. And so I panicked. and I went running back to the Marines early 2007. I'd only been a civilian for 12 months, so I didn't have to do training again. I just did annual percentage weapon test, basic fitness test, weapon handling test, and I don't know if they needed to do this, but they threw me in the CS chamber and gassed me for a little bit.
There you go. That'll teach you for being a civvy. Have that. Yeah.
But within 4 weeks, I was back in uniform again. It was like I'd never left because I've been outside for only a 12-month period. And then I went to 40 Commando up in Taunton. They were next on the rotation to deploy to Afghanistan. So I went straight into pre-deployment training and then hit the ground running in Afghan in September 2007 for a 6-month tour.
And then 3 months later, everything went a little bit Pete Tong, or not. It depends on how you look at life, I suppose. It depends on your philosophies. But so let's go to Christmas Eve 2007. Was that a routine patrol, or was that were you going into attack a position, or what was the deal?
We had been locked up in camp in our base for about 2 weeks due to lack of manpower. You know, a couple of lads had these silly little injuries, like one fell off the back of a truck and twisted his ankle. A couple of lads got ripped out to go on R&R. So our manpower was down. We had 3 sangers to protect, which meant we couldn't mount foot patrols at the same time. Yeah. So as soon as that manpower was boosted, we went straight out on a patrol, which really there was no objective of it, really.
It was just a bimble.
Prior to that, enemy location, go disrupt it. Enemy weapons cache, go destroy it. Go look after these villages type thing. This was just literally, the brief was 2 sections, 8 men in each section. We're going to leave the rear camp, the rear gate of the camp. One go this way, one go this way. Walk around the perimeter. Don't go any more than 300 meters out. Meet at the front entrance of camp. Come back in, and then we're going to open up our Christmas meal and have a curry goat, I think we had for Christmas dinner or something like that. So really basic, low. It was just to get us out, to stop us feeling cooped up and to stretch our legs. So I was second in command of one of the sections. We'd been out about 4 hours. We were just coming to finish up, and we were on the high ground. We could see, we had quite a good view of the camp and the base we were working out of. And beneath that, just off the side of the main dirt road, were the other group of lads that we left with earlier in the day. So we were tasked with giving them overwatch so they could safely get back into camp. We would look after them, and then they return the favor when they get behind the perimeter wall. So we're up in this high feature. The section commander starts giving lads positions. I take my half of the section, and then in front of me, about 4 meters, was this little bowl in the ground. Now, I thought to myself, I don't need to explain to you, mate, but for the listeners, when you go far on a foot patrol, you want to take cover behind a building, a wall, a tree, a shrub.
Anything that's just going to protect you from, getting shot at.
Right, exactly. But we're on this ridge line, right? So we don't have anything except for this bowl. And I think if I get in there, I get on my belly, that's the best protection that we could have. Now, looking back retrospectively, if I was the enemy planting landmines, then that's exactly the perfect position to do it. But I was young and, stupid. So we jumped in. The lads all started taking their fire positions. I just stood back for a bit and observed, made sure that they were okay, made sure that we were covered, all our arcs of fire were covered. And then when I was happy and they were happy, I went over to my position. And as I went to get down on my stomach, I knelt on and detonated an improvised explosive device.
Which is essentially a bomb for people who don't, or a mine for those that maybe don't understand what that is. It's almost like a man-made. What did they use? Like an RPG style in the ground, or was it like was it a little bit more advanced?
So it was. So we were working with some American Special Forces guys, and they came in and cleared the area afterwards and wrote a report about it. There were 7 of these devices in this little area, and it was an anti-personnel mine, which is designed to maim and not kill. The idea is that you blow someone's foot off, all their mates come to help them, and then they pop over the hill with AK-47s and take everyone out. But on top of that, they had put the warhead of a 107mm Chinese shoulder-launched rocket.
Christ.
Which will blow the side of the building off. And
so both then, as opposed to my question then, they'd done both. It's stuck a RPG like what? So for those guys that have seen things like Rambo, the thing that they stick on their shoulder and it comes out like a cone and
a bazooka. I call it.
A bazooka. Yeah.
It was the warhead, the explosive warhead of that on top of a mine. So I stood on the warhead. It put pressure on the mine. The plates in the mine touch. The mine explodes. The warhead explodes, and I explode.
Yeah. So did you? I know this sounds like probably a very daft question, but did it then just go dark, or did you have that split second which was like, fuck me?
No, I remember it all, mate. So for the listeners, if you've got to imagine the terrain that we're operating in, right? It's very sandy and very dusty. So when an explosion happens, temporarily you're blinded because of the smoke screen and the dust that gets kicked up. I was in no pain. And my initial instinct was we've been attacked, so what you want to do is ID the enemy, start getting some fire down, some suppressive fire, peel back, find somewhere safe, and then figure out what you're going to do and neutralize the threat. So I start thinking to myself, and you've got to imagine this is chaos, right? And I can't see anything. I can hear everyone around me screaming. Everyone, I'm assuming, thinks we've been attacked. Now behind me, about 600 meters to the rear, beneath me, was a small rectangular forestry block, and everything else around it was just flat mud fields. So instantly, I think that's the only place, and I knew this terrain, every inch of it. I'd operated it for 3.5 months. That's the only place anyone with any common sense is going to launch a rocket or a mortar attack on us. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm like, right, turn around, Mark, ID the enemy, start shooting. All the lads will start shooting. There's a HMG in camp. Someone hopefully will get on there. And that will literally saw the forest in half, the firepower from that thing. So in my mind, I'm saying, turn around, turn around, turn around. But even though I can't see, I knew I wasn't moving. You mean? You just know.
Yeah.
And so I thought, right, I'll wait for this dust cloud to settle. I'll observe the situation, make some quick calls on the ground and figure out what to do. So it gets to about chest height, and I'm panicking, hoping that my friends are okay and nobody's been hurt or killed. Can't see anybody, can't really make sense of what's going on. So I carry on waiting, and then the dust cloud hits the ground and disappears. And I look down to where my legs should have been, and they're just been completely ripped off from the knees down. So I kind of figured out what it was that had happened and what I'd done at that point, although it didn't feel real.
Yeah.
And anyone who's been in a traumatic incident, like a car crash or something like that, they'll know what I mean when I say that. It's a very surreal experience. You're looking at something that your brain can't compute. And when there's no pain, it makes it a lot harder to try and digest and understand what it is you're looking at.
Did they think that there was no pain because of the sheer amount of adrenaline, or that the fire from the IED had cauterized the wound, or what rationale had they given you as to why there was no pain? Or did it then just come back in a massive wave and it went like that?
I think it's both, right? The human body is amazing. And this is not really a comparison, but it's the only way I can really think to explain it. If you took a piece of paper now and you consciously went to give yourself a paper cut on the finger, it'd hurt, right? But sometimes, you're going about your day and you look down, you're like, oh, how did I do that? You don't even realize that you've maybe give yourself a paper cut. And I think that's what happened here. Do you know what I mean? Your body it's just insane. And I think the adrenaline, it rushes to where it needs to rush to, and it helps you cope with the pain. And a lot of people I've spoke to who have been in a similar situation, they all say the same thing. It's like an intense pins and needles feeling. If you take the worst pins and needles you've ever had and you multiply it by 1,000, that's what it feels like, just throbbing.
Yeah.
Right? There's no pain. It's just really uncomfortable and irritating. And I just look down and I'm like, you can't really comprehend what you're looking at. And you just like, what's happening? I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense.
Was anyone else caught in the blast, or were you staggered far enough apart that it didn't impact anybody else?
So one guy got shrapnel in his back and his upper arm, but it wasn't life-threatening. So I was T1, he was T4, I think, which is
triage.
The casualty triage system. So yeah, I was pretty much gonna die, and he was like walking wounded. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and at this point, had you realised that your arm had gone as well?
Yeah, so I always struggle to explain this because things happen so fast, right? But I looked at this, and then like 2 seconds later, I'm like, shit, my team. So I ignored it, and I started looking around to make sure everyone else is okay. And as I looked over my shoulder, I saw the section commander. It was a good friend of mine. We went through training together. And, you know, he was in shock clearly by what he was looking at, which kind of reinforced to me that I had been injured, but I still didn't quite believe it. And I went to look back at my legs again. And as I got to like the 3 o'clock position, that was when I saw my arm. And it was lying next to me in the sand. It had been ripped open from the bicep to the wrist. My hand was still attached, but all the bone had been shattered. And the flesh and the muscle and the tissue was just hanging out everywhere. And I don't know why, but I picked my hand up and I kind of held it in front of my face, and I looked at it, and everything was just flopping. It was like a bag of water, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
you know, loose and floppy. And then everything hit me at once. Like, you've stood on an IED, you've lost 3 limbs, you're probably going to die. This is Endex for you. And I dropped my hand in the sand, and I just screamed because I was so angry at what it sounds so bizarre when you say this, but I was angry. In my mind, excuse my language, but I was the dickhead that stood on the IED, endangered my friends' lives, you know, and I hated it because for 3.5 months we've been going toe to toe with these guys and just smashing them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the dumbest thing in my mind, what you can do, which is stand on an IED because you can't fight back. I was the one that did it, and I got so angry. I just dropped this hand and I screamed out with frustration. And I knew what the SOPs were, the operating procedures. Now was like, no one was going to come running in to save me because we're trained not to do that. I'm in now like I think it was a 12-foot crater now, rather than a little shallow bone in the ground. The evacuation was going to be unbelievably difficult, you know, but for some reason in the back of my mind, I always knew I was going to be okay because I knew how good the guys I was working with were, and I knew they'd do whatever it took to get me out. And so with no pain, you know, with a mind full of anger, but at the same time, I was relaxed. I just took my helmet off, threw it, and just laid there and just waited for the machine to kick in, you know, knowing that the lads were going to get to me, I was going to get out in some way, shape or form.
So assuming then the attack never happened, as in what you would have expected, you know, if it was going to be an ambush, it would have been instant. So the lads had assumedly taken up defensive position and what have you. So what was the amount of time before you had the first set of hands on you, sort of dragging you to wherever it was you were going to go? Did they send a heli in, or what was the deal from there?
So instantly, and it's unbelievable how this is just professionalism, right? Lads, I'm sure they got emotional, but they didn't let their emotions take over. So straight away, one of the guys is given a 9-liner on the radio, sending a casualty report back to HQ. They're then scrambling out a helicopter from Camp Bastion, which is about 25-30 minutes away. The guy closest to me is on his belly, doing his mine clearance drills, marking a safe route for when the medic gets there. The medic's instantly getting scrambled out of, and luckily we're like 300 meters from the camp gate, so we're very close to the HQ compound. He's doing that. Another guy is coordinating all-round defense in case there is a small arms follow-up, and everyone just clicked in, you know, and the guys are just talking to me constantly, trying to keep me fighting and keep me conscious. And
were you talking back to them as well? Were you, or were you just like, just still in your own head, or?
It was a mix of like groaning, I think, and telling them to F off. just because you don't know what to really do in that situation.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're just praying that they're going to come and get you. And the medic got to me really quickly, you know, and because the guys had done their drills properly, he got straight into this minefield. He started putting tourniquets on, got the stretcher out. You know, there was a point where he put me on a stretcher. So my right foot was still kind of attached by like a tendon. So when he dragged me, that's the first time I got any real pain. So we had to pick my foot and boot up off the ground and put it on my belly while they evacuated me. They got me off this high feature. The vehicle was at the bottom on the main road waiting. He starts driving back into camp, going up the incline. And, you know, these are not tarmac roads. These are very, you think you got potholes in the UK. You need to see the potholes. So you're bouncing around in the back like this. And the guy's got to be quite aggressive driving because the helicopter's inbound. And there was a certain point where the medic fell out the back. And then I went stumbling out after him. But the driver swung round, reached out and grabbed the femur bone poking out my right leg and kind of held me in this vehicle. He then just drove me to the HLS. The helicopter landed, and that's the last thing I can remember. There's this Chinook coming down, this huge sandstorm that was created, and then the tailgate dropping, and I blacked out, which is when they told me later on that I had died.
That's absolutely mental. At what point did the dark humor kick in? Because we're kind of renowned for having sick sense of humor. And also, at what point did you reach down to make sure that the boys were still attached?
So the dark humor kicked in instantly, right? So they loaded me and that other casualty in the back of the helicopter. This is what I've learned since. They checked me for all signs of life. So no pulse, couldn't get any intravenous lines in because my veins had collapsed. They put an oxygen mask on, didn't steam up. So they literally went, this guy's dead, leave him. We need to work on the other guy. So they're working on the, you know, Milky, the T4 casualty, and they walked past me to get some equipment to go back to work. And as they walked past me, my eyes started fluttering and opening. So one of the medics alerted everyone else. A couple of the guys that were spare came to work on me. And 3 days before this, whoever the top brass are in the army medical field had given the green light for this new technique to be used, where if you can't get an intravenous line into somebody's veins, you can drill into their tibia and fibia.
Wow.
Right. The problem being, I didn't have a tibia or fibia. No. So first of all, this is a brand new technique. It had never been used on a human casualty in the field before in a real life situation. And I didn't have what they needed to make it work. So the medics, I mean, they're unreal, these guys and girls, what they do. And you got to bear in mind as well, all the time they've practiced this, they're in a sterile room, they're on the ground. Now we're in a Chinook, right, that's banking left to right. It's full of sand and dust. The pilot's trying to avoid ground fire from RPGs and AKs. So these guys are presented with something they've never seen before. You know what I mean? And I was a mess as well on top of it, like just like trashed. And so they made some really, there's no other word, but courageous decisions. And they took a drill and they drilled into my hip. One in the front, one in the back. They put a line in. It didn't work the first time. They said the skin was too loose. So they tried it again. They tightened the skin, went in. The line bit. They got intravenous lines into me. They said within about 3 minutes, I was awake and responsive again. And this is where the dark humor kicked in. Apparently, like, one of the first things I said was that my ass hurted. my ass was hurting. And that's apparently a side effect of massive...
The hole or the cheeks?
All of it. But apparently this is something to do with morphine. If you have an immense amount of morphine, it's quite painful on your ass for some reason. But they said, like, considering the comment, that was what made them smile and start crying, because they knew that that was a sign to them that I could pull through from it. So then they took me back to Camp Bastion. They put me in a field hospital, and then the surgeons just, you know, had a look at me, and they just had to amputate both legs above the knee and my right arm above the elbow, because I would have died.
Mm. So when did they explain to you how the technique worked? So are you able to, was it drilled into bone that they were able to get the IV in, and it was uptake? So how did it uptake from there? Did they explain that to you? Is that something to do with bone marrow, or is just like some sciencey medical shit that they're awesome at and it just works?
I have no idea, mate. Not a clue how it worked, but fortunately it did.
Yeah. You were. Yeah, there was definitely some say luck on your side. Well, an unlucky situation, but you made it through. You survived. So that's the luck portion, that they actually made that thing work. And those guys are phenomenal in what they do. From there to Headley Court to all of the guys that have come through similar situations to yourself. Like they're fucking unbelievable people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then it was road to recovery. So what was your mindset like at the time? Because there's going to be surely a wave of either realization or well, you tell me. I mean, when you sort of, the dust settles, so to speak, you sat in the bed, you're now conscious, you've had to have your legs amputated above the knee, which for most people that understand amputation is above the knees is a challenge then for the prosthetics and all that kind of stuff later down the line. At what point did you kind of go from, well, life's never going to be the same again? When did that kind of sort of hit?